Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Happy President's Day 2024. I have been asked what president was the most pro-battleship, or which president liked battleships the most. That's a real hard question to quantify, but go ahead and leave your answer in the comments down below. Which president do you think liked battleships the most? In order to give an actual quantifiable answer, we looked at which presidents authorized the most battleships. This is kind of a difficult thing to talk about because the authorization, funding, design work, approval, laying down, building, launching, and commissioning of a ship can easily span multiple presidencies. Or, if you're FDR, it could all just happen during your presidency. So, did the president who had the ship commissioned during his term like that battleship most? Did the president who had it authorized during his term? I decided to go with authorized. If the person is signing the paycheck to build the battleship, even though it won't be completed for another 4, 5, 6 years, possibly after his term, then that's what I'm going for. So I made a list of all of the big gun capital ships authorized for the US Navy and which presidents authorized them. So we're specifically looking at the new Navy period, so steel, steam engines, exploding shell-rifled guns, breech loading, through the end of the battleship era. So the sorts of ships that we're looking at are, of course, the battleships and battle cruisers, also the pre-dreadnoughts and armored cruisers, which were the battle cruisers of that generation, and also the monitors, which often had big guns themselves, but only the new Navy monitors, not the Civil War era ones. First off, let's start with an honorable mention. President Ronald Reagan. While he did not authorize any battleships to be newly constructed during his term, he reactivated 4, which was pretty unprecedented, and given that the battleship era was over, I think that's a statistic that's worth including. With 4 all-big gun capital ships authorized during his presidency, Reagan still has the least of any other president on my list. The next 2 tied for least are Ulysses S. Grant, who authorized 5 monitors during his presidency, and talk about ships not being completed during the presidency. They're not completed until several presidencies later, just because of the condition of the Navy at that point. And then Harrison, who authorized 4 battleships and an armored cruiser during his presidency. So each of those 2 authorized 5 big gun capital ships. Next up, we have President Taft. Taft authorizes 7 battleships during his 4-year presidency. Next up, we have to introduce another monkey wrench into the gears here. While presidents may have authorized large numbers of battleships, many of them were canceled. And in fact, the 2 presidents that had large numbers of capital ships canceled during their terms were also the same ones who had authorized them. So, while they were willing to authorize a ton of battleships, oftentimes this was only for political reasons, and they were also willing to cancel those battleships to reappropriate the funding to other places. So we're going to go by the number that they actually allowed to be completed, but I'll give you both numbers. So next up would be President Woodrow Wilson, who had 9 capital ships completed during his presidency, all battleships. However, he had authorized 22, 16 battleships, and the 6 Lexington-class battle cruisers. Of those, he was willing to give 11 up entirely for the Washington Naval Treaty, and he was willing to convert 2 of the battle cruisers into aircraft carriers for 13 total ships not completed as all big gun capital ships. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first, we're doing dry dock tours of the battleship, starting on April 6th and running through at least the end of May on weekends we will be taking groups of people into the dry dock to see Battleship New Jersey out of the water. There's a link in the description below if you're interested in participating. This is potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see a battleship, especially an Iowa-class battleship, out of the water. Next up, with 10 battleships and other capital ships to his name, Grover Cleveland. He built 6 battleships, 1 monitor, and 3 cruisers. One of these cruisers was USS Olympia. And although she is not technically an armored cruiser, which is my cutoff for this list, because she was armed with 8-inch guns, I'm counting her on the list of all big gun capital ships. For the era of the pre-dreadnoughts, battleship caliber guns were usually 12-inch for the main battery and 8-inch for the secondary battery, but those combined big guns were usually the main armament of the ship. So any of these ships built with 8-inch guns I consider to be capital ships of that era. By the dreadnought era, 8-inch guns are exclusively for cruisers and not for capital ships. Next up on the list, we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who completed 11 big gun capital ships out of the 23 that he authorized. With a total authorization of 23, he outdoes Wilson by 1 for the most capital ships authorized by a single president. And when you count in the aircraft carriers, he blows every other president out of the water. By far, Roosevelt authorizes the most capital ships of any president. But in terms of big gun capital ships, he only completes 12, the 10 fast battleships and the 2 Alaska-class large cruisers. He cancels 4 of the Alaskas, 5 of the Montanas, and 2 of the Iowas. Tied in first place, we have the 2 imperialist presidents, McKinley and Roosevelt, both having 18 all-big gun capital ships authorized during their presidency. McKinley has 8 battleships, 4 monitors, and 6 armored cruisers. Theodore Roosevelt I'm giving the victory to because he built 14 battleships, some of them dreadnought type, and 4 armored cruisers. So by far, he authorized the most battleships which would go on to be commissioned of any US president. And despite having a peacetime presidency, he used his battleships by sending the Great White Fleet around the world. So not only because of the number of ships he made, but because he knew both the military and political value of those ships and brought the United States onto the world stage as a major power, I'm giving Theodore Roosevelt the award for liking battleships the most. But again, who did you think deserves that title? Let us know in the comments section down below. Do you think we should have only talked about true battleships, or do you think that bringing in monitors, battle cruisers, and things like that was worth adding into the equation? Also let us know in the comment section. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We appreciate your support, and there's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the museum. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find out about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.